My name is Noah. Until 6 months ago, I was just another 29-year-old graphic designer with a cramped apartment in Chicago and a life that moved along predictable tracks. Then my grandfather died, leaving behind a substantial estate, a vindictive younger brother, my Uncle Liam, and a mess that would change my life in ways I never anticipated. This is the story of how I fought for my inheritance, confronted painful family truths, and unexpectedly fell in love with Brian, the estate attorney who helped me find justice and myself. Grandpa Samuel was the constant in my life after my parents died in a car accident when I was 12. He raised me in his sprawling Victorian home in the Chicago suburbs, surrounded by his collection of first edition books and antique clocks. A retired judge, he was stern but fair, teaching me about integrity and perseverance while supporting my artistic inclinations even when they baffled him. I don't understand why anyone would pay for those computer drawings of yours, he'd say, peering at my digital illustrations through his reading glasses. But you've got talent, Noah. Always follow your talent. Uncle Liam was Grandpa's opposite in every way: opportunistic, charming to outsiders, but manipulative behind closed doors. 15 years younger than my father had been, Liam resented that Grandpa had paid for my college education while refusing to fund his perpetual get-rich schemes. He lived in California and rarely visited, which was fine by me. Our brief interactions at holidays were strained, at best hostile. At worst, when Grandpa died peacefully in his sleep at 87, I was devastated but not surprised. He'd been declining for months, his mind still sharp but his body failing. I organized the funeral, greeted distant relatives, and tried to process my grief. Uncle Liam flew in 2 days later, missing the funeral but arriving in time for the reading of the will. Sorry about the old man, he said, not sounding sorry at all as he strode into Grandpa's house. My house now, or so I thought. Heart finally gave out. Well, at least he had a good run. I gritted my teeth and said nothing, having learned long ago that engaging with Liam only fed his antagonism. Instead, I focused on the upcoming appointment with Grandpa's lawyer. The law offices of Hamilton Pearson Associates occupied half a floor in a gleaming downtown high-rise with views of Lake Michigan that probably cost as much as my annual salary. I sat nervously in the reception area, dressed in my best and only suit, while Liam paced impatiently, checking his Rolex every 30 seconds. Mr. Carroll and Mr. Carroll, the receptionist looked up. Mr. Pierce will see you now. We were led to a conference room where a man rose from behind a polished mahogany table. I'm Brian Pierce, he said, extending his hand. I was your grandfather's attorney for the past 15 years. I'm very sorry for your loss. My first impression of Brian was that he seemed too young to have been Grandpa's lawyer for 15 years. He was perhaps in his mid-30s, with dark hair just beginning to silver at the temples, intelligent blue eyes behind tortoiseshell glasses, and a slim build accentuated by a perfectly tailored charcoal suit. My second impression was that his handshake lasted a moment longer than necessary, his eyes meeting mine with unexpected warmth. Let's get this over with, Liam interrupted, dropping into a chair. I've got a flight back to LA tonight. Brian's expression cooled as he turned to my uncle. Of course, I understand you're busy. The slight emphasis on busy made it clear what he thought of Liam missing his own brother's funeral. He opened a folder and placed reading glasses on his nose, transforming instantly into the serious attorney I'd expected. I'll summarize the main points of Judge Carroll's will, Brian began. The estate consists of the family home valued at approximately $1.02 million, investment accounts totaling roughly $3.8 million, his collection of rare books appraised at $400,000, and various personal effects. Liam leaned forward, a predatory smile spreading across his face. I stared at the figures, stunned. I knew Grandpa was comfortable, but I'd had no idea he was worth over $5 million. To his grandson, Thomas James Carroll, Brian continued, glancing at me. He leaves his collection of books, his personal effects, and the sum of $50,000 to be paid immediately. My heart sank. I didn't Care about the money but the house. I'd assumed I would keep living there surrounded by Grandpa's memories. Liam's smile widened. The remainder of the estate, Brian paused, looking directly at me, is to be held in trust, with income payable to Thomas Carroll for life, after which the principal will pass to charitable organizations specified in the trust documents. What? Liam erupted, jolting to his feet. That's impossible. I'm his son. Where's my share? Brian removed his glasses calmly. Judge Carroll left you a personal letter, Mr. Carroll, which I'm instructed to give you now. He handed an envelope to Liam, who snatched it and tore it open. As Liam read, his face flushed dark red. This is bullshit, he spat, crumpling the letter and throwing it across the table. He wasn't in his right mind. I'm contesting this. That's your right, Brian replied evenly, but I should inform you that your father anticipated this reaction. The will includes a no contest clause, meaning if you challenge it and lose, you forfeit the provision he did make. For you, what provision? I asked, speaking for the first time. Brian hesitated. A monthly stipend of $3,000 for life, conditional upon certain behavioral requirements. Liam laughed bitterly. Behavioral requirements, the old man's controlling me from the grave. Typical. He grabbed his coat. You'll be hearing from my lawyers, Pierce, both of you. Will, he stormed out, slamming the door behind him. In the sudden silence, I exhaled slowly. I'm sorry about that, I said. Don't apologize for him, Brian replied, his professional demeanor softening slightly. Your grandfather warned me this might happen. I picked up Liam's discarded letter, smoothing it out. May I? Brian nodded. It's part of the estate documentation now. The letter was brief but cutting. Liam, I've watched you waste every opportunity I've given you. I won't fund your irresponsibility from beyond the grave. The stipend is generous enough to supplement a decent living, but not enough to live on without working. No way. Will oversee the trust because, unlike you, he has demonstrated integrity and judgment. Perhaps this arrangement will finally teach you the value of honest work. Dad, ouch, I said, wincing. That's harsh even for Grandpa. Judge Carroll was direct. Brian agreed, a hint of a smile playing at his lips, but fair. He wanted to provide for both of you in ways that reflected your characters. I set the letter down. I don't understand why he made me the trustee. I don't know anything about managing money. That's where I come in, Brian explained. The trust is professionally managed by our firm. You'll have oversight and approval rights, but not day-to-day responsibilities. He hesitated. There's more to discuss, but perhaps you'd like to take some time to process this first. I nodded, feeling overwhelmed. Yes, thank you. As I stood to leave, Brian reached into his desk and handed me a business card. My cell number's on the back, he said. Call anytime if you have questions. And Noah, he paused, don't worry about your uncle's threats. Your grandfather's will is solid. I took the card, nodding the personal number written in neat handwriting on the back. Thanks, Brian. Over the next week, I tried to adjust to my new reality. The $50,000 was immediately transferred to my account, more money than I'd ever had at once, and I began receiving monthly distributions from the trust that were 4 times my graphic design salary. I could quit my job if I wanted to pursue my art full-time, travel, buy a new car to replace my 15-year-old Honda. Instead, I found myself paralyzed with indecision, sleeping in my apartment rather than moving into Grandpa's house, which was technically mine now, but still felt like his. 10 days after the reading of the will, I received formal notice that Liam was contesting the will on grounds of undue influence and diminished capacity. The letter from his attorney, printed on expensive letterhead from a prestigious Los Angeles firm, demanded immediate cessation of all trust activities pending legal resolution. Panic rising, I called the number on the back of Brian's card. It was 9:30 p.m. on a Friday. He answered on the second ring. Brian Pierce, it's Noah Carroll. I'm sorry to call so late, but it's fine, he interrupted, his voice warming. I was just finishing some work. What's up? I explained about Liam's legal challenge, my voice growing more agitated with each sentence. Noah, breathe, Brian said calmly. This is expected. Your uncle is following through on his threat, but it doesn't mean he'll succeed. He hired Schuyler and White. I said. I googled them. They specialize in trust litigation and have some kind of 90% success rate. There was a pause. Where are you right now? Brian asked. At my apartment. Why have you had dinner? The question caught me off guard. No, actually, there's a diner near your place, Lou Mitchell's. Could you meet me there in 30 minutes? This will be easier to discuss in person and I haven't eaten either. I hesitated, surprised by the informal suggestion. Sure, that would be great. Lou Mitchell's was a Chicago institution serving comfort food 24/7 in a no-frills setting that attracted everyone from tourists to late shift workers. When I arrived, Brian was already seated in a corner booth, his suit jacket draped over the back of his chair, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms lightly dusted with dark hair. He looked younger, less formal, and oddly more approachable than he had in his office. Thanks for meeting me, I said, sliding into the booth. I hope I'm not ruining your Friday night. Not at all, he replied with a small smile. My exciting plans included takeout and case files. He pushed a menu toward me. Order whatever you want. The Monte Cristo is life-changing. We ordered Monte Cristos for both of us at his insistence, and then Brian leaned forward, his expression serious. First, stop worrying about Skylar and White. They're good, but they're also expensive, which is precisely why your uncle hired them. He's hoping to intimidate you into a quick settlement. Is that what I should do? I asked. Settle? I don't even care about the money that much, but the idea of Liam getting rewarded for being terrible just feels wrong. Brian studied me for a moment. Your grandfather said you had integrity. I'm seeing that now. He took a sip of water. No, I don't think you should settle. Judge Carroll anticipated this challenge and took steps to make his will contest proof. He underwent cognitive evaluations before each revision, documented his reasoning, and ensured there were multiple witnesses to his competence. So we'll win. Litigation is never certain, Brian cautioned, but yes, I believe we have a very strong case. Our food arrived, and as we ate, the conversation shifted from legal strategy to more personal territory. Brian asked about my graphic design work, seeming genuinely interested in my explanation of brand identity and user experience. I learned that he had initially planned to be a public defender, but found his way to estate law after clerking for a judge who specialized in probate cases. I like helping people protect what matters to them, he explained. It's less dramatic than criminal law, but equally meaningful in its way. By the time we finished our sandwiches and second cups of coffee, I realized 2 hours had passed, and we'd talked about everything from Chicago politics to our favorite bookstores to the challenges of dating in our respective fields. Graphic designers all want to date photographers, I complained good-naturedly, and everyone assumes I'm straight because I don't fit their stereotype of gay men. Brian laughed. Try being a gay attorney. Everyone expects me to date doctors or finance guys. My last boyfriend was a pastry chef, and you'd think I'd announced I was dating an alien. It was the first explicit confirmation of his sexuality, though I'd begun to suspect. Something warm unfurled in my chest at the realization, followed immediately by a cold splash of reality. He was my lawyer. Any interest I might feel was inappropriate and probably one-sided. As if reading my thoughts, Brian's expression became more professional. I should get going, but Noah, try not to worry about your uncle's challenge. We'll file our response on Monday, and I'll keep you updated every step of the way. He insisted on paying for dinner. The firm has a budget for client meetings, and we walked out together into the chilly Chicago night. My car is this way, he said, gesturing downtown. Can I drop you somewhere? I'm just a few blocks that way. I replied, pointing in the opposite direction, but thanks, he nodded, suddenly seeming uncertain. Well, good night then. Call if you have any more questions. I will. And Brian, thanks for dropping everything on a Friday night. It really helped. He smiled, and something in his expression made my heart skip. Anytime, Noah, I mean that. Over the next few weeks, the legal battle intensified. Liam's attorneys demanded depositions from everyone who had contact with Grandpa in his final years, including his doctors, housekeeper, and me. I spent 6 grueling hours being questioned about my relationship with Grandpa. Insinuations made that I had manipulated him against Liam. Through it all, Brian was a steady presence, objecting to the most outrageous questions, preparing me thoroughly beforehand and debriefing with me afterward. Our professional relationship gradually developed personal dimensions, texts, checking in after difficult court appearances, occasional dinners to discuss case strategy that inevitably expanded to include books we were reading or exhibitions I wanted to see. I found myself looking forward to these interactions more than I should of. Noticing details like the way Brian's eyes crinkled when he laughed, or how he absent-mindedly traced the rim of his coffee cup when deep in thought. Several times I caught him watching me with an expression I couldn't quite interpret, only for him to quickly shift back to discussing legal matters. 3 months into the litigation, I finally moved into Grandpa's house. The familiar rooms comforted me though, so I rearranged some furniture and converted one of the spare bedrooms into a studio for my design work. The first night in Grandpa's my study, surrounded by his books and sitting in his leather chair, I felt a profound sense of connection to him, along with a disturbing question: what if Liam was right? What if Grandpa had been manipulated somehow? I called Brian without considering the late hour. What if we're wrong? I blurted when he answered, "Noah, what's going on?" His voice was thick with sleep. "I'm sorry, I didn't realize how late it is," I said, glancing at the clock that read 11:45 p.m. I shouldn't have called. "It's fine, I'm awake now," he assured me. "Tell me what's wrong." I explained my doubts, the guilt I felt about potentially taking something that should have been divided with Liam. Despite our strained relationship, Brian was quiet for a moment. "I have something you should see," he finally said. "It's part of the case file, but I was waiting for the right time. Are you free tomorrow morning? I could bring it by around 10:00. You'd come here on a Saturday. It's important," he said simply. The next morning, I nervously straightened up the already tidy house. Suddenly self-conscious about Brian seeing where I lived. I needn't have worried. When he arrived promptly at 10, dressed casually in jeans and a navy sweater that brought out the blue of his eyes, his attention was immediately captured by the architecture. "This place is amazing," he said, gazing up at the ornate ceiling medallion in the entryway. "Original features mostly," I replied, pleased by his appreciation. Grandpa was meticulous about maintaining the historical elements, even when updating the systems. I gave him a quick tour that ended in the kitchen where I had coffee brewing. As we sat at the breakfast nook with our mugs, Brian pulled a DVD from his messenger bag. "This is your grandfather's video testimony," he explained. "He recorded it 6 months before he died after his cancer diagnosis. It's part of our evidence. But I thought you might want to see it privately first." My throat tightened. He knew he was dying. He never said anything. Brian nodded. "He didn't want to worry you. He said you'd already lost too much." He set up his laptop on the kitchen table and we watched together as Grandpa appeared on screen, thinner than I remembered but clear-eyed and articulate. For 45 minutes he detailed his estate plans, explaining precisely why he had structured the inheritance as he had. "My son Liam has demonstrated repeatedly that he cannot be trusted with substantial sums," Grandpa stated, his judicial demeanor evident even from his hospital bed. "He has squandered every opportunity, borrowed money without repayment, and shown no regard for anyone but himself." He went on to describe Liam's gambling addiction, failed businesses, and a particularly painful incident where Liam had stolen and sold some of my grandmother's jewelry while visiting for Christmas years earlier. "As for my grandson Noah," Grandpa continued, his voice softening, "he has shown himself to be responsible, compassionate, and hardworking. I've structured his inheritance to provide security without encouraging idleness. The trust will allow him to pursue his artistic talents without financial worry, while the responsibility of overseeing Liam's stipend will develop his administrative abilities." By the time the video ended, tears were streaming down my face, not just from grief but from the realization of how deeply Grandpa had thought about my welfare, how well he had known me. "He was so certain about everything," I said, wiping my eyes. "Even Dying, Brian handed me a tissue. Judge Carroll was the most deliberate person I've ever known. He considered every angle, anticipated every challenge, including how you might doubt yourself. That's why you waited to show me this. Partly, Brian admitted, and partly because I wanted to get to know you myself to see if you were the person he described. He hesitated. You are, Noah, everything he said about your integrity and compassion. I've seen it firsthand. Something in his voice made me look up. His professional mask had slipped, revealing an expression of such open admiration that my breath caught. Brian his phone rang, shattering the moment. He glanced at the screen and frowned. I'm sorry, it's the office, I should take this. While he stepped into the hallway to take the call, I collected myself, unsure if I'd imagined the tension between us. When he returned, his expression was guarded again. I hate to cut this short, but there's an emergency with another client, he explained. Will you be okay? I nodded, disappointed but understanding. Much better, actually. Seeing Grandpa like that, hearing him explain everything, it helps. At the door, Brian paused. Noah, you should know that if we go to trial, this video will be public record. Your uncle will see it. I'm okay with that, I decided. Grandpa was telling the truth. Liam needs to hear it, even if it hurts. Brian studied me for a moment. You're a lot like your grandfather, you know. That same quiet strength. Then with a quick smile he was gone. The case progressed toward trial with motions and counter-motions filling the days. Liam's attorneys, realizing their evidence was weak, shifted tactics to claim that while Grandpa might have been mentally competent, I had exerted undue influence, isolating him from Liam and poisoning their relationship. This strategy required extensive examination of my interactions with Grandpa in his final years. I endured another round of depositions, this time focusing on conversations I'd had with Grandpa about Liam, trips we'd taken together, even emails and text messages I'd sent. Through it all, Brian was my advocate and anchor. He objected to the most invasive questions, prepared me thoroughly for each legal hurdle, and somehow made the arduous process bearable with his steady presence. Our professional relationship developed a rhythm, but I remained acutely aware of the current of attraction beneath our interactions. Lingering glance, a touch that lasted a beat too long, conversations that strayed beyond the case to personal territories. 4 months into the litigation, Liam's attorneys approached with a settlement offer. They would drop the challenge if I agreed to sell the house and split the proceeds plus 20% of the investment accounts. Brian and I discussed the offer over dinner at a quiet Italian restaurant near his office. Financially, it might make sense to consider it, he said, twirling pasta around his fork. Litigation is expensive and trials are unpredictable. I'm not selling Grandpa's house, I replied firmly, and I'm not giving Liam a dime more than Grandpa intended. It's not about the money anymore. Brian set down his fork and studied me. May I ask why most clients would at least consider a settlement that could end this stress? I took a sip of wine, organizing my thoughts. When my parents died, I lost everything familiar. Grandpa gave me stability, a home, a sense that some things can be counted on. This house, it's more than property to me. I met Brian's gaze directly, and giving in to Liam's bullying feels like betraying Grandpa's trust in me. Something shifted in Brian's expression. Then we go to trial, he said simply, just like that, no more lawyer talk about risks and costs. He smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his professional demeanor. Sometimes the right decision isn't the easiest or most practical one. Your grandfather understood that, so do I. Walking to our cars afterward, a light snow began to fall, dusting Brian's dark hair with crystalline flakes. The city lights created a halo effect around him, and I was struck by how beautiful he was, not just physically but in his centered certainty, his quiet passion for justice. Why estate law? I asked suddenly. You're brilliant enough for corporate work, passionate enough for public defense. Why this? He seemed surprised by the question. I told you I like helping people protect what matters to them. There's more to it than that, I pressed, sensing a deeper story. Brian was quiet for a moment, watching the snowfall. My parents disowned me when I came out at 19, he finally said. cut me off completely, rewrote their wills too. Exclude me, I put myself through college and law school on scholarships and loans. He brushed snow from his sleeve. I've seen firsthand how inheritance can be weaponized, how family money can be used to control and punish. I wanted to help people use it more wisely, more kindly. Without thinking, I reached for his hand, squeezing it briefly. Thank you for telling me. He looked down at our hands, then back at my face, something unspoken passing between us. We should get going, he said softly. Big day tomorrow with the judge's ruling on evidence. Right, I agreed. Reluctantly releasing his hand. See you in court. The week before the trial was scheduled to begin, Liam's case suffered a devastating blow. His star witness, Grandpa's former housekeeper who had claimed I prevented her from putting Liam's calls through, admitted under oath that she had been paid $10,000 by Liam to testify. The judge was furious, threatening sanctions against Liam's attorneys. That afternoon, they approached with a new settlement offer. They would drop all claims in exchange for covering their own legal fees, which by now were substantial. Brian called me with the news. It's a full surrender, he said, his voice triumphant. They know they can't win. That evening, we met at a bar near the courthouse to celebrate. The relief of impending victory had me feeling lighter than I had in months. Brian, too, seemed relaxed, his tie loosened, a rare second drink in his hand, a toast he proposed, raising his glass to Judge Samuel Carroll, who knew his family well and planned accordingly. I clinkegged my glass against his, and to his attorney who fought like hell to uphold his wishes. Brian smiled, but there was something wistful in his expression. It's been an honor representing you, Noah. The formal phrasing struck me as odd. You make it sound like we're saying goodbye. He set his glass down carefully. Once the case is officially dismissed, my firm's representation will conclude its standard procedure. Oh, I hadn't considered this aspect of our victory. The thought of not having regular reasons to see Brian created a hollow feeling in my chest. Well, I'll still need an attorney for trust administration, right? The firm will continue handling that, he acknowledged, but it would typically transition to our trust department. Different attorneys. I stared at him, trying to gauge whether he felt the same reluctance to end our association, and if I specifically requested you stay involved. Brian met my gaze steadily. That might be possible, but he hesitated. There could be complications. What kind of complications? He took a deep breath. Professional ethics require attorneys to maintain appropriate boundaries with clients. If an attorney develops personal feelings that might impact their objectivity, they should typically withdraw from representation. My heart rate accelerated. Are you saying you have personal feelings that would compromise your professional judgment? I'm saying, he replied carefully, that I've struggled to maintain appropriate professional distance in your case, and that ethically I should acknowledge that. The bar around us seemed to fade away as I processed his words. So after the case concludes, I would no longer be your attorney. His eyes held mine. Just a person who would very much like to ask you to dinner in a context that has nothing to do with legal strategy. A slow smile spread across my face. I'd like that a lot. The next day, Liam's attorneys filed formal paperwork withdrawing their challenge. 3 days later, the judge dismissed the case with prejudice, meaning it could never be refiled. By the following week, Brian had officially transferred oversight of my trust to a colleague, freeing him from any conflict of interest. Our first non-professional date was at the Art Institute, wandering through galleries and discovering a shared love of impressionist landscapes and modern photography. Without the case between us, conversation flowed even more easily, touching on childhood memories, future aspirations, and the relief of being authentic after hiding parts of ourselves for so long. I spent years being the responsible grandson, the dedicated designer, the practical one, I confessed as we stood before a Monty water lily painting. I rarely let myself want things just for me, and now, Brian asked, standing close enough that our shoulders brushed. Now I'm learning to want things, I replied, meeting his gaze directly. People, a future that I choose, not one I inherit. Outside the museum, snowflakes drifted lazily around Us, without the professional barriers that had constrained us for months, I finally did what I'd been wanting to do. Since that first meeting in his office, I leaned in and kissed him, tasting coffee and possibility as his arms came around me. I've been wanting to do that since you walked into my office and argued with your uncle, Brian admitted when we broke apart, his forehead resting against mine. That long I laughed. I was a mess. That day you were principled, he corrected, and unfairly attractive while being principled. Over the following months, our relationship deepened with the freedom of having no professional conflicts. Brian helped me transform Grandpa's house, my house now truly, into a space that honored its history while reflecting my own aesthetic. I encouraged him to consider teaching law part-time, sharing the passion for justice I'd witnessed throughout our case. 6 months after the case concluded, we had dinner at Lou Mitchell's, returning to the diner where we'd first crossed the line from strictly professional to something more, over Monte Cristos that were indeed life-changing. Brian asked if I'd considered what to do about Liam. He hasn't tried to contact me since the case ended, I said. The trust administrator says he's collecting his stipend, but that's our only connection. And you're okay with that? I considered the question seriously. I'm not angry anymore, I realized. Grandpa was right about him, but also right about giving him a safety net rather than cutting him off entirely. Maybe someday he'll understand that was its own kind of love. Brian reached across the table for my hand, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. Your capacity for compassion is remarkable, says the man who spends his career helping families navigate their most difficult transitions, I countered. He smiled. Maybe we're good for each other that way. Later that night, lying in bed in what had once been my grandfather's house but was now unmistakably ours, I reflected on the strange path that had led me here. Grief had opened the door to inheritance, which had triggered conflict, which had introduced me to the man now sleeping beside me. None of it had unfolded as I expected, yet all of it had led me exactly where I needed to be. My grandfather had left me more than money and property. He'd left me the chance to stand up for myself, to fight for what was right, and in doing so to discover my own strength. And in Brian, I'd found someone who saw that strength and valued it, who challenged me to grow further while accepting me exactly as I was. I placed a gentle kiss on Brian's shoulder and he stirred, wrapping an arm around me without fully waking. Everything okay? He murmured sleepily. Everything's perfect, I whispered back, just counting my inheritance.